Welcome, everyone. This is Anthony Ross. I am the president of the Beverly Hills Bar Association. I welcome everyone to the LA City Attorney Candidate Debate, which is being moderated by my friend Richard Kaplan of Kaplan Marina, and actually a former past president of the Beverly Hills Bar Association. I know that there are a lot of things that need to be said by a lot of different people, so let me just pass it on to Richard Kaplan.
Thank you, Tony. I appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. As you can see today, we have 5 candidates for city attorney that are going to debate. I will introduce them in a moment. We look forward to a lively hour and a half and hope this will allow everybody to learn more about the candidates and get a better idea of what the city attorney's office does and also what each candidate has to offer. I do say to everybody, this is being offered by the Beverly Hills Bar, so there's a lot of lawyers in the audience. So if you want to gear your answers that way, feel free. The public has also been invited, but I just put that out there. I'd also like to thank the co-sponsoring bar associations today, the Armenian American Bar Association, the Asian Pacific American Bar Association, the Japanese American Bar Association, Korean American Bar Association, Los Angeles County Bar Association, Latina Lawyers Bar Association, LGBTQ plus Lawyers Association of Los Angeles, Mexican American Bar Association, Philippine American Bar Association, Southern California Chinese Lawyers Association, and the Women's Lawyers Association of Los Angeles. And I thank each of these sponsors. They've really helped pull people in. So hopefully we have a good, diverse crowd today listening to our wonderful, interesting candidates. Quickly, I'm going to go through the rules. Each candidate is going to get a maximum of 3 minutes to make both an opening and a closing statement. The opening will be done in alphabetical order. The closing will be done in reverse alphabetical order. We'll also be asking questions. Prior to the question, I will give the order of the answers. It's kind of, juggled around, so everyone will get a chance to go first and last. If the timing on the questions are 90 seconds, the candidates will see a yellow card come up when there's 30 seconds remaining, a red card coming up when there's 10 seconds. I'll do my best to allow them to finish, but if people go over, we'll try to stop, but hopefully we won't come to that. All our co-sponsors did have an opportunity to submit questions, as well as people who pre-registered. I did consider those in coming up with the questions today. However, we will not be taking any questions from the live audience as we have a limited amount of time today. So with that, I'm going to do an introduction of each of the candidates. They can wave, and then Ms. Cole will go first. Candidates today are Sherri, Onica, Valle Cole.
Thank you.
Hydee Feldstein Soto, Faisal Gill, Kevin James, Marina Torres. So moving on, Ms. Cole, you have the first 3 minutes. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And I'm so excited to be here talking with everybody about my platform, myself, and why I believe I'm the best choice for Los Angeles at this particular time. My name is Sherri Onica Valle Cole. You are the one who taught school today to 4th graders. You're also talking to a woman who does domestic violence restraining orders in her off hours. I am a person who has spent probably the last 4 years primarily doing personal injury defense, some limited prosecution. Before that, I spent 16 years with the Los Angeles City Attorney's Office. And I am the candidate that is proven in the sense that I am incorruptible. I actually stood up to Mike Fior in writing and told him that I believed what he was doing was wrong. And my reward for that was being let go from the office. I'm grateful to the FBI and the ongoing investigation. And I believe that that's an opportunity for me to really kind of have the Los Angeles City Hall and the corruptions that just keep on coming actually start to be addressed. I'm an independent choice for city attorney. I'm primarily self-funded with small donations. My average donation is about $108. I think you need to be very careful about who we take money from. I'm not taking any fossil fuel money or any corporate PAC money. I'm not taking money from the Color of Change PAC or LA Police Protective League. I really think that a prosecutor needs to be independent. I spent 16 years as a deputy city attorney. I started in March of 2002, and immediately before joining the office, I did some limited white-collar criminal defense as well as some personal injury. I have experience, direct civil trial experience in both criminal and civil, and I've also presided over trials as a temporary judge for the Los Angeles Superior Court in both civil and criminal. I've been a defense attorney, I've been a prosecutor, I've been a plaintiff's attorney, and I've also been a civil defense attorney. I am the person that needs to stand up and talk about my top 3 priorities. We must address mental health in our unsheltered community. We need to get those with mental illness or substance abuses out of our criminal justice system. We can't keep grinding them through our system. We don't have the time or the money or the energy for that. We also need to get them off of our streets in a place where they can recover and give them stable housing so that they can actually make that transition back into the workforce or to a more productive life. We need to talk about and really delve into police brutality and excessive force. As a mother of a Black little boy, I am scared for him, and growing up in the community with what we see every day, it seems like a new scandal regarding excessive force in young Black men and their lives and their life expectancy. I also want to abolish excessive force. To do that, I vow to prosecute those who violate policy and who violate the law. I'm also taking the very different position and tact of not providing legal defense in the case where I believe a police officer has acted outside of policy and in disregard of the civil rights of others. Civil rights are precious and they must be protected.
Sherri, thank you. Your time is up.
Thank you.
And we'll move on. Next up is Hydee Feldstein Soto.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to everyone who's here for spending your evening with us. This is a down ballot race, and I'm glad to see that at least the lawyers in town are interested in the candidates. I like to start by explaining my view of what the city attorney's job is. So I frame it as first and foremost, the day-to-day work is managing one of the largest municipal law corporations in the country. So having 550 lawyers, another 500 employees means you have 1,000 souls reporting into you, along with $140 to $150 million budget. All too often that aspect of the job is not addressed sufficiently. And whether it's in how the office is organized or in ensuring that there are human resources available and performance reviews for the lawyers and other employees, you need to manage the office so that it works. Secondly, the job is to be general counsel to the city, and that's doing the tasks that it takes to make the city work. And yes, one of them is prosecuting misdemeanors committed within city limits, but there's much more to the job than that. You do represent the city in affirmative and defensive litigation that is civil in nature, and a vast part of the job is basically drafting every ordinance, every resolution, signing off on the form of every contract, every agreement, every indenture entered into by the city. And all too often, that is a function that is not paid, doesn't have sufficient attention. In addition to just the drafting and the clarity of it, I never want to go to the ballot box again and see a ballot measure that screams homelessness as title and summary. And then when you read the text of it, it has nothing to do with homelessness. It's just a political way to frame it so that it gets passed. I can promise you transparency and clarity in the drafting of what voters go to vote on, and you'll know what you're voting on when you go to the booth. The third part of the job, besides being general counsel and managing general partner, is being one of only 3 citywide elected officials. And that means we have constituents. People say to me, and I don't need to say it to this room full of lawyers, but people say to me, does that mean you represent me? The answer is no, I don't represent you. I represent the municipal corporation that is the city of Los Angeles. But as one of only 3 elected officials, I do have an obligation back to my constituents. And one of the things that I'd like to try in the office, assuming that it suits the organization and that there's feedback from the folks there that they would like it is to implement a neighborhood law court, much like the one in Oakland, where you can send lawyers out into the field with community-based policing, with social services, with mental health services, and with substance use professionals to get things done. I want to make the city work. Thank you.
Thank you, Hydee. I appreciate it. Next up is Faisal Gill.
Hi, how are you? Thank you all very much for taking the time out of, I know, your busy schedules to listen to the city attorney candidates and what we have to offer. So my name is Faisal Gill, and I'm running for city attorney. Let me start out by telling you about my background. I immigrated to the United States when I was 8 years old, lived in Northern Virginia, right outside of DC. My father was a cab driver and my mother worked in retail. Both of my parents worked nonstop to make ends meet. We lived paycheck to paycheck and were even evicted once. I was going to be a statistic. I graduated high school in June and I had my first child in October. Studying was just not something that my parents had time to stress, but I knew I wanted a better life for not only myself, but now my child. So I went to community college. I did well. I went to undergrad, and then I went on to law school. I worked my way through every step of that way while raising a child. After law school, I joined the United States Navy as a JAG Corps officer. When I joined the Navy, that was the first time in my life that I ever had any health insurance. Didn't know what it was. After joining the Navy, I went to work in the federal government. I was the Deputy General Counsel of the Office of Personnel Management. Then I went to work at the White House and the Office of Homeland Security as Associate Counsel. And then I went to work at the Department of Homeland Security as a senior official in then the Intelligence Division. After my federal service, I went to private practice and became a civil rights attorney. My practice primarily consists of criminal defense, a lot of federal criminal defense, white collar defense, civil rights, and also civil litigation, but primarily civil rights. I mainly help people who have experienced discrimination, whether by the government, police departments, or immigration enforcement. I also have an international practice where I take on despots such as the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia and representing the family of Jamal Khashoggi, or taking on the dictator in Libya by representing citizens of Libya in a federal action here in Eastern District of Virginia. I know what government overreach is. I've even taken on the city attorney's office and I've won. I know what we need to do to change the city attorney's office. In fact, what got me in this race was a case of mine where the city attorney's office charged a Black person with wrongful arrest when there was absolutely zero evidence. I thought I'd have the case solved momentarily, but I didn't. That's what told me that I needed to change the system, and that's why I'm here with you today.
Thank you. Next up, Kevin James.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting us this evening. You know, at a time when every neighborhood is affected by the homelessness and affordable housing crises, and when people do not feel safe in their own communities, when the ravages of the COVID-19 pandemic have severely hurt the health and livelihoods of countless Angelenos, and when City Hall must restore the public's trust, we need our city attorney to be a proven problem solver who will take strong action on behalf of the people of Los Angeles. I started as an attorney in Los Angeles back in 1988 at Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher as a litigator. I then went to the U.S. Attorney's Office in LA, and before returning to private practice at Greenberg Lusker and then Crosby Heafy, which is now Reed Smith, and finally at Laveley and Singer, where I started back in 2001 and where I'm working today. I will bring my many years of legal experience as a litigator working with the terrific lawyers at these great firms into the city attorney's office. I will also draw on my 7-year tenure as president of the City of Los Angeles Board of Public Works from 2013 to 2020, where I led 5 city departments, that's over 5,000 employees, to build some of the largest public works projects in the region, to rapidly expand electric vehicle infrastructure, protect water quality, and to provide critical city services uninterrupted throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. During my time as president of Public Works, I also served as the director of the Mayor's Office of Film and Television Production. Our job was to help bring the entertainment industry back to Hollywood, and we succeeded. I have extensive experience in the nonprofit sector as well. In the early 1990s, because so many of my friends were sick, I volunteered at AIDS Project Los Angeles. Then I joined the board of directors of APLA, and I was in leadership there during some of the most critical years of the AIDS epidemic. When I was president of Public Works, I had the honor of working on numerous important programs to help our city, including our targeted local hire program to help Angelenos most in need of a job to get a union card and city employment. I now have the endorsement of 13 different labor unions representing over 50 different labor locals, including the Service Employees International Union Local 721 and the Teamsters. And I'm pleased to announce that I also have the significant business support from the Central City Association and the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce. My work continued with the creation of the city's Petroleum Safety Office to finally begin protecting our most vulnerable communities. This environmental work earned me the endorsement of the Los Angeles League of Conservation Voters. When it comes to homelessness, the city attorney's race is the most important race on the ballot. That's because so many issues around homelessness today are being decided in the courts. I will bring a new legal strategy to solving homelessness on our streets. We know that the city of Los Angeles cannot solve homelessness alone. We need every city in LA County to step up and be a partner in providing housing and services for our unhoused population, and settling homeless lawsuits against the city of Los Angeles doesn't do it. As city attorney, I will use the power of the office to go through court, to get a court ruling that requires all of our neighboring cities to work together on solving homelessness under the same legal standard that we will follow here in the city of Los Angeles.
Your time
Thank
is
you
up.
for the time.
You're welcome. Next up, Marina Torres.
Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. My name is Marina Torres, and I'm running to be your next LA City Attorney. I'm bringing over 20 years of civil, criminal, and political law experience to the job. On the civil side, I used to work for two of the most prestigious law firms in the country. I'm sure there's some folks on here from either Munger, Tolles & Olson or Wilmer Hale, but most recently, I actually had the honor and the privilege of serving as a federal prosecutor right here in Los Angeles, where I faced the worst of the worst. I battled all types of corruption. I took on money launderers and fraudsters, and I brought down international drug cartels operating right here on our streets. I start off with my professional background, but it's really my upbringing that provides me the values and gives me the worldview that I'm going to be bringing to the job. I grew up as a daughter of formerly undocumented immigrants from Michoacan and Jalisco, Mexico. My mom grew up at in a chicken canning factory, and my dad was at a Sunkist orange packing plant. They worked there for several years, and through a lot of hard work, some opportunities, and a lot of luck, we made it work. I'm the first one in my family to graduate from grade school, high school, college, and now obviously law school. I'm a proud graduate of UC Berkeley. I did a one-year AmeriCorps stint in the fields of Illinois, helping migrant farm workers sue their employers for workplace abuses. And then I made it to Stanford Law School. I even had the opportunity to work for President Obama as a political appointee working on DACA and immigration work. But still, I was the last person to think that I would ever be a federal prosecutor. My family's own history includes periods of incarceration, and I grew up avoiding gang turf wars and drive-by shootings in my childhood. But I have to tell you, as a prosecutor, I have seen firsthand the problems that our city is facing. And it's precisely the dramatic rise in crime and homelessness, the rampant corruption in City Hall, and frankly, the city attorney's office being raided by the FBI and my former coworkers that convinced me that I had to do something. And that's when I decided to run for city attorney. Because the city needs someone who is going to fight for the people in this city. And remember that that job is the job of a prosecutor, not a politician. I believe we need to prioritize public safety here in Los Angeles for its people, for its businesses, and for its visitors. Not only am I the most qualified to handle the city's most pressing problems right on day one, I consistently make it through the primary and all of the polls that we know of. I've gotten the endorsements of Congresswoman Nanette Barragan, Linda Sanchez, former Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa, and many, many other state and elected leaders. Those are all online. The Mexican American Bar Association has also endorsed me. And I'll end with this. Running for office is incredibly hard. But standing by and watching your city being run to the ground by corrupt and inept politicians is much, much harder. And that's why I'm running for LA City Attorney. Thank you.
Thank you. So as I told you, what I'm going to do next is read the order. And just so the audience knows, we did talk. I'm just going to refer to everybody on the first name basis here going forward. So for this first question, Hydee is going to go first, Marina second, Sherri third, Kevin fourth, and Faisal last. So the question, imagine first one important thing is relating to homelessness. We all see the number of people living on the streets of LA, living in the parks, at the beach, under the freeways, and in their cars and RVs. Do you have a plan as city attorney to resolve the homeless issue? And will it involve creating any new laws? And really, how do you propose to execute your plan? Hydee?
Thank you. I actually spent a fair amount of time thinking about what the city attorney could actually do as opposed to the city. Obviously, the city attorney cannot build housing, but I've identified the following actions that I think would help. Number one, the city is spending between $2,000 and $3,000 per square foot to build housing for the homeless. From my perspective, that's insane. I mean, the market rate is $200 to $300 per square foot. And if you look at our city charter, the city charter requires competitive bidding, an obligation that is honored in the breach by our city. City attorney has to sign off on every contract over $5,000 as to due authority, legality, and form. I would not be issuing an opinion letter that something is authorized on a no bid basis when it winds up being 10 times market. That just doesn't work. And if we take a look at what's at the core of the LADWP scandal, it was precisely that, $1 million bribe for a $30 million no bid contract. The second thing the city attorney can do is take a look at the financing structure. It doesn't work to put out 20% of costs as funding for our housing, because in this market, the incremental tax credits for the equity are not available, and senior construction loans are not available when they have to negotiate an intercreditor with the city. Third, streamline the building approval process, create a single port of entry for developments for shelter and homeless housing. Fourth, access the city's fair share of public health dollars and mental health funding. And I have a plan to do that. It's on my website. And fifth, at the end of the day, no one has the right to privatize our public spaces. We need to reclaim our public spaces and keep them for the public, not for anyone's private use, no matter how slight or great their need. Thank you.
Thank you. Marina, you're next.
Thank you. I think when I look at the news, when I watch the news, I'm just appalled that we are simply not talking about the role of mental health issues and substance abuse really in the homeless issue. It seems like our politicians and our elected leaders keep trying to solve what's a very complicated problem with what's a fairly easy solution: just build more housing, and let's build it at the cost of $700,000 and rising a unit. And by the way, it won't be enough, and we're going to have it in 5 to 7 years. Right now, those of us living in Los Angeles are living in what is, frankly, a state of emergency. We, in the couple blocks that I used to walk from my office over to the federal courthouse, there were people literally losing their lives, both unhoused folks, as well as people just walking to work, walking to the metro, on their daily lives. We need to talk about the role of the mental health and drug abuse, and also the criminal cartel component. As a federal prosecutor, I was part of a big takedown that occurred a couple of years ago, where we took down a cartel arm that was operating in Skid Row and preying on the unhoused population. We arrested 50 cartel members, took thousands of fentanyl pills off the street, and hundreds of pounds of methamphetamine. Until we begin talking about the homeless issue and the homeless population like something like it's not a monolith, and until we begin to address mental health and substance abuse, we're not going to solve this problem at any moment.
Thank you, Marina. Sherri, you're next.
Thank you. Great question. I've been looking at this housing and the unsheltered crisis from a more personal perspective. I was unsheltered in my youth, and my family's transfer from being unsheltered to sheltered was fairly quick, less than 6 months. And it's a very complicated issue for me. It's also, when I look at what are the solutions, we have a proposition that they're trying to put on the ballot, which I support, that puts a new tax on housing that is sold at a certain level, a one-time tax. One, we need funds. Two, we need to figure out why all these Section 8 vouchers are not being used. It seems that there has been a law in the book since January 2020 that does not allow landlords to discriminate on the source of funds. And I don't believe that that law has been educated landlords, nor has it been vigorously enforced. I would vigorously enforce housing laws in terms of discrimination. But I also want to get to the root cause of why Section 8 is not accepted by landlords. And it's a more practical issue of a delay of getting a tenant in and getting a revenue source in. So I want to dig into this crisis and say to ourselves, do we need more housing inspectors? Do we need more building inspectors? How do we get the let out of building new housing? The reality is there's just not enough housing, whether it's to buy or to rent at every level, not just for the low income. Therefore, we really need to dig into what we can do, either build up more high density dwellings in single family homes, not something I'm very excited about, but something that may have to be done. We need to dig into the issues. I also think Marina was right in another debate.
Sherri, it is your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kevin, your turn.
Thank you, Richard. You asked what I could do as city attorney. So I'm going to stay in my lane as city attorney and tell you what I can do quickly. All right. We know what the solutions to homelessness are. It's housing and shelter of varying types with accompanying services, mental health services, addiction services, job placement services. The city of Los Angeles cannot provide this solution alone. And one of the main reasons I'm running for city attorney is because this is the one office. The mayor can't do it. The city council can't do it. The city attorney's office is the one office that can require our neighboring cities to step up. Google Beverly Hills and homeless shelter and tell me what comes up. You will see shelters in the city of Los Angeles. That's just one example of the other 87 cities in LA County that have not stepped up. The legislature is not going to do it. The council can't do it. So what the city attorney can do is just stop settling the homelessness related cases. There are two primary types of cases, as many of you may know. There's the cases about the person in the public right of way and the cases about the personal property that obstructs the public right of way. The person in the public right of way has been resolved by the Ninth Circuit in the Boise case out of Boise, Idaho. No more litigation on that. It's been resolved. But we don't have resolution on personal property that blocks the public right of way. Those are the cases. I would not have settled the LA Alliance case. We should not settle the Garcia case. We need a court ruling that then, like they got in Boise, that then applies to all of the other 87 cities in LA County. Then we have a standard legal procedure, uniform legal standard, and a level playing field.
Thank you. Faisal?
Look, we are not going to solve the homelessness problem through the courts. We're just not going to do that. We have tried that before. We're trying it now. Now, yes, the homelessness issue winds up in the courts. So your question you asked was, what can I do as city attorney? So like Kevin, I will stay in my lane as city attorney. There's lots of things that I want to do. I agree with everything that's being said. Mental health services need to be provided. We need to provide more services, but there's a limited role the city attorney has in that. What the city attorney can do is figure out how the city attorney is going to treat the prosecution of folks who are charged under 4118 and other homeless rules. What I have said very clearly is that I will not prosecute somebody for simply being houseless. That I believe is immoral. And if you don't believe in the morality, it's not practical. How much of a sentence are you going to ask for somebody who's sleeping outside on an encampment? A week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 months? When is the last time that somebody went to jail and came out with a house? It doesn't work. It's not practical. But what that will do is if you have a city attorney that basically says, look, I am not going to prosecute this, it will put the pressure on the city council, and the mayor to come up with another solution that is viable. Now, Mr. James talked about property in the right of way. We have dealt with that in the Ninth Circuit to a certain extent in the Jones case, where that's exactly what that case was about. And then, in fact, they turned it around. We settled. It's very good to say that I will not settle all these cases. It's great to say that I will not settle, the Alliance case. But what was happening in the Alliance case? What was the judge saying in the Alliance case? These cases, we know how they're going to go as we go to the Ninth Circuit. Ninth Circuit is ruled over and over and over and over again. And whereas we'd love to have all the other counties involved,
Faisal.
all right.
Thank you.
Passionate issue.
We'll come back. Okay, for the next question, the order is going to be Kevin, Faisal, Marina, Hydee, and Sherri. This question is, and we're staying kind of on the housing homeless issue. One proposal to resolve the homeless issue and improve housing options involves permitting or forcing more multifamily dwellings in residential neighborhoods. Also, there is a push to ease building restrictions for granny units, also called ADUs, accessory dwelling units. Are you in favor of these laws? And what do you see as the city attorney's role in enforcing these laws? Marina? I'm sorry, Kevin, you're first.
All right. Kevin, right?
Yes, Kevin.
Okay. Look, I have always, as a former city official and a municipal government guy, have always been in favor of local control. But at this point, we have, as you mentioned, Richard, we have some SB 9 and SB 10, which you're essentially talking about, where the state legislature has stepped in. So what the city has to do at this point, and one of the things that we can't do, because the Attorney General has let us know, we can't game the system to avoid the kind of density that we need to be able to provide additional affordable housing in the city of Los Angeles, and also provide just additional market rate housing in the city of Los Angeles. One of the things I would do as city attorney to protect affordable housing, first of all, and to promote it, is to preserve our affordable housing stock. Talking about enforcing existing ordinances, the home sharing ordinance in the city of Los Angeles has not been effectively enforced by the city attorney's office and the agencies in the city that have responsibilities around that. I would do that as city attorney, because if you don't do that, what happens if you don't enforce your home sharing ordinance is Airbnb and some of these other platforms come in and they take over rental properties. They take over a lot of properties and they rent them out, essentially turning them into hotels and short-term rental facilities in a way that we then lose that affordable housing stock. That has to stop in the city of Los Angeles. So the first thing you do to promote affordable housing is maintain the stock that you have. And then you can look at some of the other options to meet our regional housing needs assessment.
Thank you. Faisal, you're up.
Look, SB 9 and SB 10, it is state law. As city attorney, I will enforce SB 9 and SB 10. I know that might not be popular in this area, but I have to do that in the best way that we can resolve this homeless problem, and also make sure that people who are on the verge of houselessness do not go in there, is to increase our affordable housing stock. And one of the ways to do that is to build multi-family dwellings. So as city attorney, I'll work with city council, I'll work with the mayor to increase that and enforcing SB 9 and SB 10. I also will enforce the existing home sharing, existing ordinance, especially against Airbnb and all. That really has added, that's taken away from our affordable housing stock. Now, again, as city attorney, my first job is to make sure that I put the city council and mayor, in the best footing to give them maximum flexibility to do what they can. But in this case, as we have seen, not just in Los Angeles and other cities, that this cannot be solved on a municipal level. The state government has stepped in, and as unpopular as it may seem, the next city attorney must enforce SB 9 and SB 10. And that could have consequences that maybe are not liked by certain folks in the neighborhoods, but that has to be. That's the way we're going to get rid of our encampments. That's the way we're going to solve our houseless problem, is by making sure that we have more affordable housing. And as city attorney, I will do whatever I can, not just SB 9, SB 10, or anything else, to ensure that we can increase the housing stock in the city of Los Angeles, affordable housing stock.
Thank you. Marina.
Thank you. Well, I won't reiterate what others have said about the aspect of this being a statewide issue as opposed to what we can do on the ground as city attorney. I will note, though, that as city attorney, I think it's important to keep an eye towards just how significantly some of the projected developments are going to change certain neighborhoods. I think obviously everyone agrees that we have an affordable housing problem in Los Angeles, but some of these neighborhoods are, they may change significantly when it comes to just bringing in a lot of apartment complexes. So I think building and assisting in the building in a way that balances our need for affordable housing with the character and the needs of the neighborhood, I think is very, very important. And to that, I think that as city attorney, what we can do is we can increase renter protections. I mean, that's another area and an place where folks become homeless is when folks get unlawfully evicted or when renter protections are just not followed. And that's an area that we as prosecutors can really jump in and make a difference to ensure that people stay in their homes and are allowed the protections that the law requires. I too would prosecute the home sharing ordinances. I think that that's an area right now where it really is lacking much, if any, prosecution. But as has been mentioned before, that takes a lot of affordable housing units off of the market in a way that's really detrimental to the folks here in Los Angeles.
Thank you, Marina. Hydee?
Thank you. I had to unmute. Let me start out by saying there is no SB 10 to enforce locally. That statute is not self-executing. It depends entirely on local passage, and our city council has not passed it. SB 9 is in fact a statewide law. However, if anybody's been following, our California state auditor recently published a report that showed that the RENA numbers were materially defective and were based on a methodology that was wrong. So without going into great detail, I don't know that we have to enforce either SB 9 or SB 10 at this juncture. Both are in limbo. Several cities have in fact sued over the RENA methodology. And I think one of the things the city attorney should take a look at is whether the matter of building affordable housing, the housing element of the general plan, can be updated in conjunction with all of the other elements of our plan. We need to build housing. We need to do adaptive reuse of existing structures. We need to create shelter. We need to hit on all fronts to get people indoors. But zoning is not the issue in LA, ladies and gentlemen. Planning is. We haven't updated the general plan since the 1960s. The infrastructure element was last updated in 1972 before broadband. When you put a building in the middle of a low density neighborhood, you've got the small city trucks with one driver that rely on you and me to take our trash cans in and out in 4 and under units. And you've got the great old big outsourced trucks with 3 people that need much wider streets to pick up the dumpsters from 5 and over. So doing spot zoning affects everything from trash collection to school services to everything around. We need to update our general plan and we need to provide for housing, including workforce and affordable housing in that plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Sherri?
Thank you. I'm going to look back at my experience within the office. I actually started in something called the Citywide Nuisance Abatement Program, which was a program that took on homeowners and property owners that allowed their properties to be used for either drug sales, storage, or vice purposes, or were generally a public nuisance. There we took property owners to court, both criminally and civilly, to enforce our local ordinances. I am probably the only prosecutor on this panel today that's successfully prosecuted a trespass. And it involved a trespass not of a 4118 that has been discussed, but it was actually of state law 602 and its subsections. And in that case, we had a mentally ill man who did not understand that he was no longer authorized to stay on the property. Ultimately, he was sentenced and given a jail time of 180 days because we could not recognize what the real issue, which was mental illness and treatment for that same issue. We have, as the city attorney, have used the power of 17200 to confront entities that have done patient dumping. I've talked to a voter whose brother was dumped off without notice to her in a location that she has nowhere. He has schizophrenia, late development. and she's not even able to get information or to assist him when he was discharged. We've got to fix 5150, and we need to talk more seriously about short-term, interim, and long-term housing for the unsheltered.
Thank you. This round of questions, the order is going to be Marina, Kevin, Faisal, Sherri, and Hydee. And the question is, and this has to do with the criminal courts, as city attorney, you will be in charge of prosecuting all misdemeanor cases in the city of LA. There is currently a large backlog of cases clogging up the courts, and obviously there's priority to the felony cases. There's an ongoing conversation of alternatives to prosecution, such as diversion, more city attorney office hearings, and the neighborhood justice program, which is already in effect. Where do you stand on those, and what changes would you make to kind of clean up the system in prosecuting misdemeanor cases? Marina?
All right. Well, I think first of all, the neighborhood prosecution program is incredible. You have a lot of amazing, amazing prosecutors working on the ground in their communities. It's by far, I would say, the most popular program I've heard about from the city attorney's office as I've been campaigning. However, there's just too few of them. It's one neighborhood prosecutor per police precinct. And the way I see the role of neighborhood prosecutors is it's frankly to expand it and to expand the responsibilities of the neighborhood prosecutors. But we're going to need a lot more than just one prosecutor per precinct if we're going to be able to enhance and increase and promote community policing, which is what we've seen study after study. It's what makes community safe. It's not removing the number of police officers. It's not eliminating the police force. It is community policing. It is investing in your community, establishing relationships with community and prosecutors. I would also increase the options for diversion court, mental health court. Obviously, I mean, we've talked about the homelessness problem. I've talked about mental health, and so have others. We need to expand the mental health offerings and the mental health diversion court offerings as well. Finally, I mean, if there are areas where criminal misdemeanors are better and more appropriately pursued as citations, that's an area too that I think would be effective in reducing the backlog of criminal misdemeanors.
Thank you. Kevin?
Well, quite simply, if you can, hire more people to handle the existing misdemeanors in the office. You know, the office has seen a lot of folks leave. We saw people leave around COVID. The separation incentive program called SIP in the city, a lot of city departments, including the city attorney's office, lost a lot of folks. So we need to hire additional folks. I like to talk about my relationships with the budget teams and the city council, given my years in City Hall, to be able to do that at the city attorney's office. Also, alternatives to filing cases. I suspect you'll hear us all talk about this. We support the diversion programs in the office. You have some pre-filing diversion programs. Marina just mentioned the ACE program. NJP that you mentioned, Richard, also is one of those. City attorney hearings is something. Well, but to solve those problems, again, it's pretty remarkable. If you look and see the number of attorneys that are able to staff these programs, it's a pretty low number, and those need to be increased. In addition, you can also focus on post-filing diversion programs. There's rapid diversion. You can do statutory diversion. So there are ways to kind of get those cases off the docket. And those are all things that I think that all of us would support. I do want to, you asked about criminal backlog, but I also want to talk a little bit about civil backlogs for lawyers as well. How long do people have to wait in the city of LA for a traffic collision report? 3 to 6 months. It shouldn't be that way. That's a kind of a backlog itself. As city attorney, we'll get it down to 60 days. That means a lot for plaintiffs' lawyers. It means a lot for defense lawyers that have to handle these cases. And we don't have victims having to wait for insurance coverage to help their medical case as well.
Thank you. Faisal?
So reforming the broken misdemeanor system is one of my top priorities as city attorney. I want to focus more on a restorative justice model, more pre-plea diversions. For many reasons, we need to change our broken misdemeanor system. First of all, the misdemeanor charges mostly disproportionately targets communities of color. As city attorney, I will significantly reduce the prosecutions of misdemeanors that do not enhance public safety. Things like trespassing on public property, public drunkenness. For example, the city attorney has, that I know of, a friend of mine prosecuted this case or defended this case. The city attorney's office has charged someone with a foul order, emanating foul order on a bus. Charges like that clog up our system. Public drunkenness is another main one that is charged. You know, there are clear public safety reasons for reducing the amount of misdemeanors that are prosecuted. The National Bureau of Economic Research studied and put out one statistic that says individuals not prosecuted for violent misdemeanors committed 75 fewer felony arrests and 67 fewer misdemeanor arrests when compared to prosecution and defendants. So my plan is, first of all, is to charge less. There will be on day one, just like Rachel Rollins did in Suffolk County, is to put out a memorandum of what charges the city attorney will not be charging as a default. Now, there could be sometimes, there could be certain facts that would lead me to prosecute certain of those things, but for the most part, do not prosecute those non-violent things. That will reduce a significant amount of backlog. Then focus on free plea diversion programs. That's what we need to do. The neighborhood prosecutor program is very good. I would tweak that to basically make it more of a neighborhood advocate program, get NJP more involved in it, put the things together. So we basically have more communities basically dealing with the outcomes. Restorative justice is the way.
Thank you. Time's up. Thank you. Appreciate it. Sherri?
Thank you. The city attorneys on average 100,000 cases a year. We've got a backlog in our civil courts so that I've taken advantage of as a defense attorney, much to the chagrin of the plaintiff's bar. And there's actually statutory authority for what goes priority, and it's not always the criminal felony cases. Depends on if you have child witness. But I would prioritize family violence cases. I'm a survivor of domestic violence and sexual assault. Any cases that involve children, I would eliminate the ACE program. Homeless people don't have time or money to be paying for citations. Homeless advocates have talked to me personally and asked me to just stop it, to get out of the way, to let them recover. I would not prosecute driving without a license or prior violations of driving on a suspended license. If they didn't have the money to get their tags or get their registrations or what have you, they're not going to have more money if you continue to add charges to the books. 647B and walking for soliciting of acting in the behavior of a 653.22, which is loitering for purposes of prostitution. As a Black woman, I have to say this, and I want to say it loud. We are overly prosecuted for this crime. It does no good, very weak evidence, and we really need to go after the human traffickers. Pre-plea diversion that everyone's such a fan of, the real fans that aren't of this particular type of diversion are the judges. They get dinged if their cases are deemed open, and that's why judges and prosecutors have routinely engaged in post-plea diversions, which I would strongly enforce and strongly encourage. Failure to appears, marijuana offenses, they should be gone. I'm going to make sure they're gone. I'm going to go through all of our gang injunctions and make sure that we've done right by the people. Our LAPD can't even get gang evidence in due to the prosecutions that are going on with the Metro unit. We've been kicked out of that particular part of the justice system for good reason.
Sherri, thank you. That's time. Hydee.
Hey, I guess my first answer would be I'd want to get to the office and see what the reasons for the backlog are. I've heard resources, I've heard this, I've heard that. To some extent, there may be a backlog in part because of the diversion programs, and hopefully they're being successful. And that necessarily means that there's a delay between arrest and completion of the diversion. So I don't know. Without data, I can't tell you what I would do necessarily, but I do agree that the backlog needs to be reduced by whatever means possible, as long as it doesn't compromise the fairness and the justice of the prosecution. I have said repeatedly that one of the things I would want to see is a disparate impact analysis on a number of our penal codes. Are we enforcing drinking out of an open container against a fraternity party with keg drinking on a sidewalk at UCLA or USC as much as we are against some old men playing dominoes in Boyle Heights or against teenagers at a skate park in South LA? We need to be sure that comparable outdoor enjoyable activities where people happen to drink alcohol are being treated the same throughout our city and irrespective of the color of the people. I will also say that besides that, I don't view it as a legitimate function of the city attorney to fold her arms and say, I will not enforce this law if the law is valid and constitutional. The city attorney is not a policymaker in that sense. The city attorney's policy is limited to the exercise of prosecutorial discretion that's on a case-by-case basis and has more to do with the characteristics of the defendants than with a weakness. Sorry, that's my dog. A weakness in the law
I was just
that
saying
the city
time.
attorney herself drafted. My dog cut me off. Sorry.
Thank you. Okay. The next round of questions, good timing there, is Faisal, Sherri, Kevin, Hydee, and then Marina. And we're staying in the criminal justice realm. There's currently a campaign to recall District Attorney George Gascon. Where do you stand and why? Faisal, you're first.
So I am against recalling DA Gascon. Look, the recall system in California is broken. We saw with the recall of Governor Gavin Newsom. We're seeing with other recall efforts here as well. If you don't like someone, an elected official, the way to take care of that is at the ballot box, not through the recall process. I think the recall process should be limited to if the person has committed a crime or is derelict in their duties. DA Gascon, whereas some folks might not agree with his policies, is not derelict in his duties. He just has policies that people just don't agree with, and that's why they're recalling him. He ran on those policies, and Angelenos elected him on those policies. So I think that recalling DA Gascon for those reasons, since he has not done anything egregious, is not right, and that goes to why our recall system is broken in California.
Thank you. Sherri?
Recall Gascon all day, every day. A real prosecutor does exercise their discretion. And I agree with Hydee that you need to use that. And I would use my discretion as a misdemeanor prosecutor to not enforce certain statutes, whether they are constitutional in anyone's view or not. And I respectfully disagree with someone I consider very learned on in this area. But I will say the reason I don't support Gascon and I would like to see him recalled is I'm thinking about the children. I'm thinking about Gabriel Fernandez. I'm thinking about the two sisters that were butchered. I'm thinking defendants that are sitting in jail laughing. To come into a very experienced office with prosecutors dripping with the experience, albeit a different perspective, and wholesale change the policies without including them in the conversation, to me is draconian and it's wrong. And it's led to a disrespect for the law. And that is the reality. I love the fact that he's hired people that probably refer to my own children as barbarians. I personally recruited many defense attorneys to the office while I was in there because I love the diversity of perspective. I don't have a problem with that at all. What I have a problem with is wholesale change, no input from the staff, and folding their hands and only unfolding them when you're about to be recalled. Crime matters. Black women matter, and stop negotiating with our lives.
Thank you. Kevin?
Thank you. The city attorney and the district attorney must have a good working relationship. It's important for our representation of the city of Los Angeles and for public safety in the city of Los Angeles. Cases, as you may know, are transferred from office to office back and forth for varying reasons. So as the city attorney, before we even know if there is a recall on the ballot, because right now there is no ballot, there is no recall scheduled, there is no campaign that has been set. The petition gathering is still in I don't know where they are in the middle of the phase, but we don't have a recall on the ballot at this time. So as city attorney, it would be premature to comment on.
Thank you. Hydee?
I take no position on any race other than my own. Having said that, I don't believe in ducking questions. I certainly don't have a position on the recall of the district attorney one way or the other. What I will agree with is I do think that we've seen way too many recalls in California generally and in LA specifically in the last 2 years. elections have consequences, and there is another election in 2 years. So depending on how long the recall takes, it might not be much longer before there is another election, as we saw with CD11. I will also say that from my perspective, whatever the benefits or detriments of the substantive policies out of the district attorney's office, I also agree with Kevin that the DA, the city attorney, and all law enforcement has to work together effectively if we're going to keep our neighborhoods safe. And so taking pot shots at one another in a public forum is probably not the best approach to make sure that you have a good working relationship when you come into office. As a management 101 rule, I would not walk into the city attorney's office and upend policies from the top down on day one without meeting with my staff or simply with meeting with public defenders. And so from a management standpoint, I do think there's lessons to be learned. Thank you.
Thank you. Marina.
I hope I'm going to be, as clear and as candid and as strong as I'm able to, but I have some incredibly strong disagreements with some of the policy decisions that Mr. Gascon has implemented in his office. First and foremost, getting rid of hate crime enhancements. I have prosecuted these hate crimes. I consider hate crimes to be particularly insidious because you go after someone, you victimize an individual for who they are as a person. And at a time when hate crime against AAPI folks and people of color is going up, I really think that that was a very bad policy move, one which I think he agreed and has now walked back. So now I think we do have hate crime enhancements. Gun enhancements he got rid of, again, at a time when gun violence is increasing here in Los Angeles and around the country, in fact. But that was an incredibly bad call. And then finally, and these are just the ones that pop in my head, I mentioned before, I started off as a domestic violence prosecutor in my beginning of my prosecutorial career, and that involved child sex offense cases and child abuse cases. One of the things that Gascon has gotten rid of is great bodily injury enhancements for broken bones in cases of child abuse. I think that's incredibly wrong. I think that was absolutely the wrong decision for society, for LA, for the victims' families, for everybody. I think that it's very concerning, and if I were Mr. Gascon, I would ask myself, it's incredibly concerning when over 90% of your workforce supports the recall. And so short of a recall, I would encourage, him some self-reflection and wondering what good can you really do in an office when over 90% of your line DAs want to see you recalled.
Thank you. Next round of questions. Sherri, you first. Hydee, Faisal, Kevin, and Marina. Question is, and Hydee kind of stepped on this with the relationships. As city attorney, you will be working closely with the LAPD. How do you envision that working relationship during your term? What changes would you make? And first up, Sherri.
Thank you. We'll get it right by the end here.
Yes.
Well, I have an extremely close relationship with LAPD, as many of you realize. I'm actually married to an LAPD officer that just retired after 33 years. We actually met on the job. However, I will tell you this, I'm also a very strong proponent of not covering up not only what LAPD or any other agency within the city family, including council members, do that I think is wrong, needs to be changed. And I've been very direct in my communications with them that one of my main motivations is the safety of my Black little boy, my Black husband, my Black dad, my Black self, as we travel and engage with law enforcement. That police brutality and excessive force needs to be abolished, punto final. And I said that to their faces, and I will say it again. I do not believe in defunding the police. I'll say that again. I want to see resources go to the other priority areas, but the reality is I don't see that as requiring a defunding of the police. And so I feel like I have had a strong working relationship with law enforcement, and that will continue going forward. Part of that is just recognizing that times are changing, and we need to do some de-escalation, and we need to add some mental health and social workers to the team and do what we can to really fairly protect and serve all of Los Angeles, not just some of Los Angeles.
Thank you. Hydee.
Richard, can you repeat the question? Because I think I lost it a little bit.
Sure. As city attorney, you will be working closely with the LAPD. How do you envision that working relationship during your term? You know, what would you change?
Again, the issues with respect to the LAPD are embedded in our city charter when you talk about reforming the relationship. There's state law provisions, that's the Public Safety Officers Bill of Rights, and there's federal qualified immunity. So in terms of working with the police, I view it as something where I understand that the police are standing in between the city and the victims. And so your question of backlog really goes to the pain that an individual officer feels when a victim calls and calls and calls and says, what's the decision? And the city attorney's office is not holding up its end of the bargain because we're not making a decision and we're not being transparent about the way in which we make decisions with that kind of a backlog. I would expect to work closely with the LAPD if for no other reason than they are a client. And we need to recognize that there's at least 6 different law enforcement agencies working within city limits. There's sheriffs, PD, airport, port, school police, and each one of them has different needs and different attributes. And so how you work with the police is really on a day-to-day basis. You are the lawyer for the department. And when an individual goes on a frolic and detour, or when an individual commits harm to the people that they are supposed to protect and serve, then the city attorney has a different role to play. But absent that, it's a working relationship where they serve and protect, and the city attorney's job is to divert, prosecute, enforce, and make reasonable decisions quickly and transparently and
Thank
justly.
you. Faisal?
So I will have a fair but balanced relationship with the LAPD. Police accountability and police reform has been the centerpiece of my campaign. I think the city attorney has a huge role to play in holding police accountable. The city attorney is the attorney for the municipal corporation. City attorney is the attorney for the city of Los Angeles, not any individual department, not the city council, and not the mayor, not LAPD, any individual officers within LAPD. When LAPD officers commit misconduct as city attorney, I will hold them accountable, and I will let them know that on day one. When LA City PD officers do not commit misconduct and are wrongfully accused, I will defend them as well. That has to be the role of the city attorney. What we've seen thus far is the city attorney has basically, for lack of a better term, has been basically a rubber stamp for LAPD, where the city attorney does not hold LAPD accountable. If you were to file a claim against the city for excessive force or police brutality or anything else, the city attorney sends you a stock letter within 90 days. I've received many of them that basically says LAPD has done nothing wrong, without looking at the evidence, without looking at anything else. Then you're forced to file a lawsuit. Then you go and eventually they end up settling because they realize that, oh, LAPD did do something wrong. The problem with that approach, besides the fact that it doesn't make any sense lawyer-wise, is that you end up paying more in judgment costs. But the other problem is you don't hold the police accountable. I, as city attorney, will hold the police accountable because I believe the city attorney's role is to make sure not just to advise on the law of every department, but to make sure that every department is actually following the law.
Thank you. Kevin?
Hi, thank you. So I've been the head of a large department in the city. On the city budget, Public Works is the second largest department at over 5,000 employees, just under Los Angeles Police Department, of course. So I'm unique in that I've been a departmental client of the city attorney's office for many years. I can tell you from firsthand experience just how critical the relationship is, based on mutual trust and respect. And so I expect my relationship with the LAPD to be very good, very strong. As their lawyer, they're the client. I'll respect that, and it will be based on mutual trust and respect. I also, though, plan on being a partner with the Los Angeles Police Department in helping the LAPD become the best police department of any big city in the nation across the board. Now, that means a few things. That means the right personnel and enough personnel, sworn and unsworn. It means training, the best training in the country. It means equipment, and it means technology and data improvements as well. Data, of course, relates directly to accountability. All of that is very important, and all of that is part of the budget process. I have a background in law enforcement in my time at the U.S. Attorney's Office. Our police department is aware of that. And it is incumbent upon me in my role as city attorney to be I believe to be a partner with the LAPD in the budgeting process to get to the best police department of any big city in America, because that's what every Angelino wants, no matter where they live.
Thank you. Marina?
Thank you. During the time that I've been a federal prosecutor here in Los Angeles, I've enjoyed a really close relationship, not just with LAPD, but with all of our local, state, and federal law enforcement partners. And let me tell you, the way we get a safe Los Angeles, the way we prioritize public safety here in this city is by better quality policing, not less police officers, not defunding the police, but better quality policing. I actually, coming from law enforcement myself, I enjoy the endorsement of a law enforcement agency. The Los Angeles Port Police has endorsed my campaign for LA City Attorney, and my push for, again, I'll say this again, community policing. We need to have that close relationship, because that close relationship is going to enable the city attorney to push for better training, push for de-escalation training, push for more community policing. One of the things that I was surprised to hear on the campaign trail is how many of our settlements involving LAPD have more to do with harassment, hiring, all sorts of different policies at the LA, retaliation policy practices at LAPD. And so that's one of the areas that I think we really need to focus on and really put more attention on. Obviously, the police shootings make the news, and those are obviously very, very important, but the hiring and retention policies and practices of LAPD are an area where we as city attorneys can really come in and make a big change. And it's going to be better for society. It's going to be safer for Los Angeles, and it's going to mean a reduction in the number of settlements that we have to pay out.
Thank you very much. And this looks like, looking at the clock, our last question before we have closing remarks. And the order is going to be Hydee, Marina, Sherri, Kevin, and Faisal. The city attorney's office has had 2 people high up in the administration plead guilty in the DWP scandal. Do you feel there is an internal problem within the office, and how would you fix it? If not, what do you think led to the misconduct? Hydee?
I wouldn't want to prejudge something I might be called upon to deal with in office. Having said that, example starts from the top down, and it starts with implementing processes and procedures that stop the kind of activity that we've seen with respect to the approval of no bid contracts without further review, with respect to gaming the system by trying to set up a lawsuit for political purposes. I saw a report from the LADWP hearing last Tuesday that showed that the city has spent $122 million in fees just on the LADWP issues that arise out of that overbilling system. That doesn't count the $2.5 million in sanctions. That doesn't count the more than $100 million refunded to customers, and it doesn't count the $67 million settlement. That's outrageous. That money could be used to build housing, to reclaim our parks, to improve city services, for all kinds of purposes. And so from my perspective, you start by leading with example, you start by regular training, you start by setting the standards and giving regular performance reviews in writing that tell people what the expectations are for the office, and that come back and revisit the decisions that have been made. And as long as you have a continuous review of everything that is going on with transparency, you ought to be in a situation where that particular kind of collusion or corruption can't happen.
Thank you. Marina?
So I'll start off by saying that I don't think that the problem is endemic in the city attorney's office. I just don't. I mean, I've had over the course of the campaign, I've had the wonderful opportunity to talk to a lot of line city attorneys. And I can tell you the vast majority of them are just looking to go about their daily lives and do good for the people of Los Angeles. They're just doing their job and they don't want to have to worry about their boss landing them either in prison or as a witness in an upcoming federal trial or as another named party in a federal criminal indictment. I mentioned before that it was the FBI raid of the city attorney's office that motivated me and really was kind of the last straw for me deciding to run for this office, because I believe that the corruption goes from the very top. I think it's endemic in the upper echelons, the upper level. For me, I think hiring somebody who remembers that that job is to be a prosecutor and not a politician that's just looking out for themselves, that's first and foremost. I think the best way you eradicate the culture of corruption that, again, I wouldn't necessarily say permeates the city attorney's office. It certainly permeates the very top at the political level, certainly permeates the rest of city government in Los Angeles. I have the utmost respect for the people handling that corruption case. It's obviously an ongoing federal criminal trial. I don't think we're done yet. Those are my friends running the case, and those are folks of the utmost ethical integrity and work ethic I've ever seen. What I would do as city attorney is hire as many former prosecutors, as many former public corruption prosecutors to be my number 1, 2, and 3 at that office.
Thank you. Sherri?
Thank you very much. I can personally testify that most of the prosecutors in the office, nearly everyone, is a good public servant, a faithful public servant, as was I, until I confronted the very top. There's no secret that Mike Fear fired me. My position is that I stood up to him and I said, no, it is not the job of a prosecutor to aid and abet a $67 million conspiracy to fleece Los Angeles and its people. What I would do about it is something very different than what Marina just suggested. I would implement a rule that requires people to promote up through the offices, because I think what's wrong is that Tom Peters and Mike Fear had never tried a case as a prosecutor that I'm aware of, and therefore had not been trained as prosecutors and did not understand the obligations of a prosecutor. They took down walls and they didn't follow long-standing practices in the office, seeing them as obstacles to their goals. Prosecutorial justice is our end game, not winning, not losing, not becoming the next mayor of Los Angeles. So that is one of my policies I would do. I would also go through all the personnel actions, bring back the good people, people that were done wrong, to give them a chance to recover and help Los Angeles get back on its feet again.
Thank you. Kevin?
I thank you. So look, it demonstrates, the DWP scandal demonstrates really a lack in judgment at the highest level of the office. I agree with Marina and with Sherri, that the lawyers in the office, we have an amazing city attorney's office. I know they were my lawyers at Public Works for the better part of 7.5 years or so. I know a lot of them, and they have the highest ethical standards, of course. But this one went awry, and maybe that's putting it nicely. But I think that it starts when you get into the weeds a little bit with the decision to go through a reverse auction class action settlement, where you're basically picking the most beneficial parties for you to settle the case in a way that is kind of tricky too. When you look at the role of the city attorney's office, you represent the city of Los Angeles being sued, but you also want to do good by the ratepayer. And I think it's that political desire by folks that may have been looking for a higher office that resulted in some bad decisions being made. And then it also hurts your ability to go after the contractor, as we saw that case had to be dismissed. And how do you solve this? Well, one, you have an inspector general now at the Department of Water and Power. I applaud that. Secondly, as I put on my website, I'll create and bring in an anti-corruption task force that will have reps from the U.S. Attorney's Office, the DA's office, the State Attorney General's office, ethics, the Controller's office, and a couple of folks from academia that will have the ability to look at what is available without breaching the attorney-client privilege on processes like this.
Thank you. Faisal?
Look, the DWP scandal represents a breakdown of two things, a breakdown in leadership and a breakdown in oversight. There were glaring red flags that I think any of the, most of the lawyers here listening would see that these are red flags. I mean, you had a settlement that was very soon after, an attorney had been selected. The problem was there was no oversight of outside counsel process. Now, at least on paper, there is a oversight committee that exists in the city attorney's office that's supposed to manage outside counsel. I will make sure that there is an oversight committee that manages outside counsel, especially in high visibility and high dollar cases. I mean, from the beginning, I believe that most of the cases should be solved by a city attorney. City work should be done by city employees. And I agree with everybody who said here, we have some amazing city attorneys working in that office. I go against them on many times. But it was a breakdown of leadership at the top. Now, I don't know, I'll take City Attorney Fiore at his word that he did not know of the case, but I think that there was a problem. If he did not know of the case, you had a high visibility case, a ratepayer scandal, you had outside counsel, you had millions of dollars at stake here. How is it that the city attorney was not involved making sure as to what was going on? As city attorney, I will be involved in cases like this, and then I will make sure that there's a committee to oversee outside counsel so to ensure that there is nothing going on. And again, where it really starts is leadership. I will make sure that the people working for me at the highest levels are folks that are incorruptible.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. You answered all the questions wonderfully. Now we're going to go to 3-minute closing statements. Marina, you're first.
Sorry about that. Thank you so much. And again, thank you for everyone who's tuned in on this afternoon and this evening to watch us answer these questions. Hopefully you have a little bit of an insight as to who we are, the values that we bring to the table, and what we're going to do as your next city attorney. Again, my name is Marina Torres, and it's precisely those values and that perspective and the years of legal and criminal experience that I want to bring to the office as city attorney. As I mentioned before, I'm a federal prosecutor who has fought for victims, and I have never been afraid of taking on a hard fight in a courtroom. I'm also a former Obama appointee, fulfilling dreams of my family's past generations and getting to work in the White House on immigration issues, helping to write and implement DACA. I am a child of formerly undocumented parents, growing up in poverty and worried about our family's immigration status and whether any one of us was going to get deported at any time. I've also had incarcerated family members. In fact, that's why I decided to become a prosecutor in the first place, because the first time that I ever visited a prison wasn't as a prosecutor, but it was to visit family. I firmly believe that I personally and thoroughly understand the pressing issues of our community here in Los Angeles. And our campaign is absolutely resonating with the people of Los Angeles. We've raised almost $400,000, raised, not written ourselves, from almost 1,000 different individual donations. We have a long, impressive list of endorsements that I'm incredibly proud of from electeds and local leaders here in Los Angeles. In fact, I'm the only candidate that's been endorsed by not one, but 2 former city attorneys. And not only that, I'm such a threat to my opponents, and I'm also the only person who's been sued unsuccessfully to try to keep me off the ballot. Unfortunately for them, fortunately for myself, I will be on the ballot as federal corruption prosecutor. Over the last couple of years, I have dedicated my career, my life, to pursuing justice, to pushing for equality, and to fighting for those who cannot fight for themselves. Because you have to understand what Los Angeles is for me and for many Angelenos. LA is a city my family came to this country for. It's a city that I came back from the White House for, and it's a city that I believe in. But when I look at my city now, I don't just see encampments. I don't just see businesses that can't function, and I don't just see families that feel unsafe. I see a loss of confidence. I see people who don't believe in our city's future, and who feel like they can't depend on their government or their elected leaders, because frankly, so many of them are getting indicted. But I'm going to change that as your next city attorney. And I hope you'll give me the opportunity and the privilege to lead that office and to be your elected representative. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Kevin?
Thank you. And again, thank you all for your attention this evening. You'll hear, I think, a lot of statements from us about how we're the only candidate with this, that, or the other. And I'm going to do one now. I'm the only candidate in the race that I can tell with organizational labor support, business support, environmental support, law enforcement support, and civil rights organizations. And I'll talk briefly about each of those. The labor support that I have that I mentioned in my opening, 13 different labor unions representing over 50 labor locals, is very important to me because of the workers that they represent, the diversity of those workers. And the city attorney's office, part of our role is to protect our workers all across the city. So I'm very proud of that. The business endorsements from the Central City Association and the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce. I can tell you the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce because of the work I did bringing the entertainment industry back, but also with the Central City Association, serving as the city's liaison to the Los Angeles Sports and Entertainment Commission, where I was the city's point person on all the major events from the 2018 NBA All-Star Game leading up to the 2028 Olympics. The Olympics had their own committee, obviously. That includes the Super Bowl, the college football playoff, the US Open Golf Championships, the environmental support I have from the Los Angeles League of Conservation Voters because of the environmental portfolio that I have and earned at the Department of Public Works, including the Petroleum Safety Office, the Climate Emergency Mobilization Office, and our City Forest Officer, and law enforcement, the support I have from the Los Angeles Airport Peace Officers Association, that's the airport police, because of my commitment to public safety in the city of Los Angeles, and civil rights organizations like Equality California and the LGBTQ Victory Fund. I moved to Los Angeles in 1988. I came here as an openly gay man looking for a city, a community willing to accept me for who I am. Quite frankly, coming from Oklahoma City, Dallas, and Houston, in the 80s and the height of the AIDS epidemic, I was very concerned about my ability to find a community that would accept me and to be able to advance in a professional environment. I found that in Los Angeles. I love this city. I actually ran for office before in 2013. Some of you may remember that. I ran on a platform of calling out the culture of corruption in City Hall. Well, time did tell. And unfortunately, I was right. What difference that makes, though, now, as embarrassing it is for our city to see these prosecutions that happens with this culture of corruption that we've had in City Hall, is that what it takes? That's what it takes to solve the problem. So while it's embarrassing for the city, it sends the message that we're not going to put up with it. And as city attorney, I won't put up with it either. Thank you for all of the work that you do. Check out my website. I have a unit that's going to be a liaison for all the bar associations in the region, and you'll be part of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Faisal?
Thank you very much again for taking time out of your precious schedule to be here with us and to listen to our thoughts from the city attorney's office. I want to thank all my opponents for running as well and for sharing their thoughts. As you can see, we have different beliefs on different issues, at least, I do. As I give you my final thoughts, I want to emphasize how important the city attorney's race is. We've seen what happens when we elect a city attorney who's more interested in pleasing the special interest than the people of Los Angeles. I'm running to restore trust in the city attorney's office. My client is and will always be the city of Los Angeles and the people that make up that city, not the council, not the mayor, or not any individual department that it consists of the city. I will make a commitment right here, right now, that as city attorney, I will be advocating for everyday people. That's what I'm committed for. I'm proud of our campaign. I'm proud that I have the support of Congresswoman Karen Bass, who hopefully will go on to be our next mayor. I'm proud to have the support of Supervisor Holly Mitchell, of Senator Sidney Kamlager, of Senator Steve Bradford, of Assemblymember Isaac Bryan, and also of Labor. I have the support of SEIU 2015. I have the support of the nurses and the National Union of Healthcare Workers, and I have the support of teachers in the California Faculty Association. We have a very strong progressive coalition who realizes that we need to make a change in the city attorney's office. The city attorney's office can be a lot more than what it has been. The city attorney's office can be the focal point in making sure that our unhoused neighbors are treated fairly and not prosecuted simply because they are homeless. Our city attorney's office can play a focal role in making sure that LAPD is held accountable and we bring about the police reform so that we can ensure that everybody in the city of Los Angeles enjoys the public safety and is treated as a respected citizen. And our misdemeanor system. Our misdemeanor system is just flat broken. We charge too much. As someone who practices in the court, I can tell you there is a backlog. I can tell you that we do need to reshape that system. And I am the best person qualified to do that. I've worked in civil law. I've worked in the White House. I've been a deputy general counsel of a major federal agency. I even worked as a city attorney of a major US naval base that had over 40,000 civilian employees there. When you look at this race, you have to ask yourself, what kind of a city attorney are you looking for? And what are the challenges that face the next city attorney and face the city of Los Angeles? I hope you go to my website, www.gillforla.com, and see my plans for the city attorney's office. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Hydee.
Well, good evening. I guess I'll take the opportunity to introduce myself a little bit. I was born and raised in San Juan, Puerto Rico. I am a proud Borinqueña and a Jutina, as I like to call myself, and I came to the US to study at Swarthmore College and Columbia Law School, where I did very well eons ago. Not sure that matters anymore. I moved to LA and I've practiced law in Los Angeles for 40 years. Traveling frequently for the job from time to time, but I was an equity partner at Paul Hastings, and I was an equity partner at Sullivan and Cromwell. I have managed lawyers many times over the course of my career. I have managed lawyers in deal teams. I have managed lawyers within the firms where I was a partner as a practice group chair, and in the profession more generally. I have had the privilege of serving as a commissioner on Jenny, the Judicial Nominees Evaluation Committee for the state of California. I served on the Ninth Circuit's merit screening panel for bankruptcy judges. I've been appointed as a member of the executive committee of the LA County Bar Association, as a governor of the Financial Lawyers Conference, and as a fellow of the American College of Commercial Finance. I have managed lawyers well. I was named as one of the 10 best partners to work for in the entire state of California by none other than Above the Law in 2010. And it's a little bit like herding cats, as we all know. I've been outside and inside general counsel to various clients. Endorsements. We all have at least one labor endorsement. The fact is, the Labor Federation did not endorse in this race, whatever individual unions may have done, and many of them did not interview the candidates since they already knew one. Business support. Many of us have business support. I was fortunate enough and have the privilege of being endorsed by the Business Federation of Los Angeles County weekend before last. Democratic clubs. I've been endorsed by every local Democratic club that has actually interviewed me has either endorsed me or reached no consensus, because so many of my policy positions are really not susceptible of being condensed into 30 and 60-second answers. It requires a longer process to explain. I've not been part of City Hall. I've never been anything other than a Democrat or pretended to be anything other than a Democrat. I will do this job without having run for office before and without any future political ambitions. At the age of 63, I'm not changing careers. I come to this with a real desire to do public service. I am trying to be the kind of candidate that I want to see when I go to vote. A public servant coming to the office to serve, not as a livelihood, to put processes and procedures in place to leave a legacy by which our city can continue to operate after I leave the office effectively, fairly, and justly, with the kinds of rules and the kinds of guardrails that will make the office work and that will make the city work. I want a city that works for us all. I hope you will join me. My website is www.hydee, and that's spelled Hydee, the word for FOR, cityattorney.com. Thank you very much for listening, and I would very much appreciate your voice, your vote, and your support.
Sherri.
Thank you. You got it right. Thank you. I am Sherri Onica Valle. I am the Afro-Latina in this race. I am the only one on this panel today that has extensive experience in the office, that knows where the bodies are buried and knows how to dig them up. I'm also a mother of a special needs little boy and a beautiful little girl. I'm a practicing Catholic, married to my husband after 33 years with LAPD. He's retired and continues to serve the people and me, and is very supportive of my campaign. Is frankly is an insider for me in terms of information about police brutality and excessive force. I have tried pretty much every type of trial that's available as a deputy city attorney, from trespass to police, battery on a police, to prostitution, you name it, I've done it. I've been in most parts of the criminal office. I've supervised, hired, trained outside of the office. I've been a civil litigator with great success, as well as supervising outside counsel, most recently for a large insurance company, those who directly reported to me, and those are outside handling cases in various parts of the state of California. I have been appointed a temporary judge and served as a temporary judge. I've tried cases as a prosecutor, as a defense attorney, and supervised them as a trial judge. I am deeply invested in our conversation about reforming the criminal justice system, about police brutality and excessive force. I'm a longtime member of the Sierra Club and a natural environmentalist. I have traveled the world with the Sierra Club. I was a hike leader as of 2006, and I graduated from their wilderness travel course in 2007. I am a mother. I am a teacher by day and a protector by night. What I am is someone who is incorruptible, stood up. Nuremberg is a place, not a defense. I am the best, knows how to fix and resurrect the systems so that we can move forward and really get the let out. Let's go deeply into this crisis of housing that is facing Los Angeles, not just for the unsheltered, but the low income and those of us who are struggling, paying more than 50% of our income to live. We all need to live. Join me. I'm Coal for Change. That's www.coalforchange.com. My average contribution is $108. I represent the working class, the middle class, and I need your help to win. Please help.
Well, I would like to thank all 5 of our amazing candidates today. We know no matter how this election turns out, the city seems to be in great hands. Lots of great ideas. You agreed on some things, you didn't agree on everything, but thank you. Just everyone, when you stay on for a moment afterwards, we're going to be posting everybody's website on here on the way out, so you'll be able to log on and learn more about each of the candidates. I want to thank the staff of the Beverly Hills Bar. Genna, who is our timekeeper, thank you. Linda McCauley, our executive director. Tony Ross, who's still here, the president, and everyone else putting this together. Thank you. We appreciate each and every one of you for taking the time out, doing your duty on your due diligence, learning about the candidates. And thanks, everyone. Have a great night.